Hi, everybody, and welcome to another exciting edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. Delighted to be talking with an author who primarily works in picture books. Picture books. I'm a big fan of picture books and what picture books can do, and also a fan of the messages and stories that this person shares. And the person that I'm talking to, I should just go ahead and say their name. It is Traci Sorell. Traci, thank you so much for jumping on and joining me for a talk.
Well, I appreciate the invitation.
My pleasure. Absolutely my pleasure. I'm going to name some titles. Folks that are watching the video version of this can, of course, see that they're arranged behind you as well. But we are still here. I see that one up there, one of my
Mhm.
favorites. I believe that's the one that has, or no, it's We're Grateful that has the glossary that is so lovely. Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah.
They both have glossaries, but yeah.
Oh, fantastic, fantastic.
Yeah, We Are Still Here also has like a policy timeline and yeah, it's a little more involved back matter. It's for upper elementary. And We Are Still Here is like a true picture book age starting, younger and but for all ages.
Lots of wonderful story there and lots of wonderful back matter. We have Classified that's up there. I see Classified. That's part of the
hmm
She Persists series, if I'm not mistaken.
Wilma Mankiller, that's the
That's
chapter
right.
that's
That's
over
right.
in the corner.
That's
Yeah,
right. Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
yeah, yeah.
That one
Yeah,
right
I've
over there.
actually got the Spanish version of We Are Grateful and Classified that the publishers have put out this year. And that's super excited, as well as a middle grade book that I finished for my friend who passed away from cancer, India No More. That will also be out in Spanish this year.
And that's Classificado right there on the
Yeah, yeah. So I
yeah.
just got the Spanish version, and Estamos agradecidos, for we are
Mm,
grateful.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's exciting.
And now there's one other one. Contenders. That's the one that I wanted to make sure to mention. Oh yeah, and
Yes,
it's right above
yes,
your head right there. Yeah.
yes. The baseball players. Yeah, that came out in the spring.
And so there's a thread through your work, and we'll talk about the sort of the inspiration and your ways of crafting and all of those things. But I do want to point out that you're highlighting an area of literature that there really just is not enough of. There are not enough books from Native and Indigenous authors that tell stories of people who might represent those communities. And so I
Yes.
very much appreciate that. I was really struck by the lack of work that there is and the lack of titles that are available when I was working on a chapter last year about comics and graphic novels and
Mm,
trying to find authors and artists who authentically represent stories was quite the challenge. It was quite the challenge. There's a
hmm
lot out there that's disparaging, but not as
hmm
much that's authentic. So I appreciate
hmm
that about your work as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I have maybe a quarter of a shelf that
Hmm.
would be comics and graphic representations, fiction or nonfiction by Native writers and illustrators. And it is definitely an area where we need a lot more representation for sure.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
And classified almost it gets to kind of a panel graphic novel kind of quality. I
hmm
think that makes it one of my favorites. I think for that reason.
hmm
Uh,
Yeah, I mean, you've got Natasha Donovan, who has done a lot of, comics work. So that book has a wonderful look for its time period that it represents, with Mary Golder Ross's life in the 40s and 50s, but then also just, because that's kind of the work that she's done. And similarly with Contenders that just came out, the baseball story, Aragon Starr has
mm,
also done a ton of comics work. And so her use of panels to break up the things, the same with At the Mountain's Base, which is a picture book, done by a comics graphics artist with Shoyo Albitre. She uses double page spreads very sparingly
mhm,
and uses
mhm.
panels to break up what is just a 111 word poem. And I remember thinking at the time after I sold it, I was like, I don't know how this is going to be illustrated. Now I recognize there are picture books that are way shorter than 111 words, but for me, it just seemed like I could not wrap my head around how it was going to work. And then the publisher said, we found this native comics graphics artist that we want you to take a look at their stuff. And I thought to myself, what? What for a picture book? I couldn't, I see. And then when I saw her sketches, I said, oh my gosh, who else could have done this? And
Yeah.
it was the same with Contenders. Like, who else could have done that baseball story and done it the justice that Aragon did? I don't know that anyone else could have, because she's just as big a baseball fan as I am. Like, both of our mothers, gave us that love of the game early. And so she spends hours drawing baseball players when she's watching the Dodgers. So she's so good at it. And yeah, so I feel I've been very fortunate to be paired with such wonderful creators for every work that I've done. It's just been such a gift, and I love having them as co-creators. Yeah, they just bring so much more to the story. I mean, they're telling more than half of the story every time, and I'm just in awe when I see their art.
And the results are really beautiful, really
Oh,
beautiful.
yeah,
Yeah.
breathtaking every time,
Uh,
every time. I just got the art for a book that's coming in spring 2024 called Being Home,
mm.
that I'm doing with Michaela Goad, who's, the Caldecott medalist, won a Caldecott honor this year. Ah, so beautiful, so beautiful. I'm super excited to um, have everyone just see what she's created. It's gorgeous
Now,
and
do you
so
get to,
detailed.
sorry, do you get to see usually some creation as you go as you're collaborating, or are there moments where you get the book and you go, oh my goodness, that,
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm doing that kind of all along. So, I mean, certainly, I had talked to her back in 2019 at ALA, and I said, I have this manuscript, and I'd love to do something with you. I think you would be great for it. And so, and this is before she's won the Caldecott or anything like that. And I said, so can I put my name forward, your name forward to my publisher as someone for them to consider? Because I know that, they've got a deep well of people that they, look at and will consider. And she was like, sure.
mm,
So she, read the manuscript, loved it, signed on. And then, just her career has gone off the charts. So we're finally able to now get this book out. And man, when I first saw the sketches, I was just like, oh my gosh. Very, very rough sketches, and then a little bit more refined. And then now I've been seeing the color. Oh, it's so gorgeous. It's just so beautiful. So, yeah,
looking forward
it's,
to it.
yeah, me too. Me too.
And love to hear about collaborations. And I've always thought of conferences as great spaces to meet on the academic side of the equation, but
Mhm.
great to hear about creators talking with one another and
Yeah.
uh, meeting that way as well.
Yeah. Bookmaking is a team sport. I mean, I'm not doing anything in isolation. The number of people that I work with and talk to before I ever give a manuscript to an editor
Mm,
is impressive, I would say. Just because there's a lot, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, there's just a lot that goes into, I mean, certainly, obviously, people reading and giving, critiquing your work, but just checking in with people about different things that you want to write about and making sure that you're accurately representing those things.
mm,
Um, and that could be around language, it could be around culture, it could be around historical facts, whatever it is. And I'm always so grateful that there are so many intelligent people that I can reach out to and provide that help, because we can't all know everything, and we're not supposed to. And then, of course, once the editor's involved, then there's a whole other team of people, right, that I'm
mhm.
interacting with. And so um, I always think by the time it gets to the shelves, like, it's truly been this miraculous process that's occurred, because
Yeah.
it has taken a long time to give birth to that story and have it be something that oftentimes is very different than what maybe my initial idea was, you know.
Mm.
But man, it's a million times better. You know, it's a million times better with all those people um, putting their input, you know, their heart, their wisdom into the story. And so, it's almost not fair to have my name on the cover, you know, because it should be everyone together. So I don't take that lightly for sure.
And I'm sure there are illustrators, artists out there that appreciate hearing that, because I know sometimes that's seen as the secondary position, or
Yeah,
um,
and it's such a horrible way to look at it because
yeah.
you discredit the fact that they are carrying well over half of the story every time in a picture book, you
Mm,
know. And so one of the exercises when I visit with students is I said, you know, I want you to type out the text from the picture book and print it out and just see it in the black and white on the page
mm,
and read through what, you know, myself or another author has done. I said, then I want you to open the book
mm,
and see for that line of text or a couple of lines of text, what how has that been represented on the page? And I said, there's so much more that you are getting from that story because of that art. I said, now, you know, part of my job is to woo the illustrator and to
mm.
make the text so that it gets in their head and they can't let it go, and they say, yeah, I want to illustrate this, because they know it's this launching pad, right? And they can take and elevate that story to levels that I cannot just with words, right? Because then it gets too bogged down and too explainy. You know, you want it to them to launch off the page and just really um, have it be a feast for your eyes, you know, of all the things that you're getting. And so, you know, I often think their name should be first, you know, because they are doing much more of, like I say, the heavy lifting. And similarly for like cover artists, I think their name should be on the cover of, you know, I realize there's some that are created or they're just photos or whatever. But when you have someone illustrating a cover, I mean, we all know, like, if the cover doesn't grab you, you're not going to pick it up, you know?
True.
So it's that first thing that will draw them. I'm not saying that someone won't just pick up a book because it's by their favorite author, but they may be less excited about it if it doesn't have an engaging cover, right? I mean,
Fair
I'm the
enough.
same way. I'm like, oh, what happened here? You know, they've had these great covers and then this one kind of, you know. So I'm always so grateful to them, you know, because I don't have visual artistic ability that way. So there's not a possibility of me ever illustrating any books. uh,
It's always interesting too to think about what are the words that are part of the page that inspired that creation, and to think about like
mhm.
what was the spark. And then I mean, it's a whole process of going and finding and thinking and meditating and reworking and all of those things that go into
Yes.
an illustration to pair up or to extend.
Yeah. Yeah. It is definitely a dynamic, magical process, you know, and to hear them talk about it. I mean, everyone kind of has their own thing, but the main thing they say is that, you know, the words touch them deeply. There's something about that story that immediately starts making their brain race, and they are just thinking about how, you know, this is happening. What can they do here? And, you know, if they find lots of room to add and do, it's very freeing for them because they can bring their storytelling, you know, abilities to the page instead of being dictated to as to what is going to appear on the page, you know, which I could never do because I don't see what they see. When I write, I'm seeing a movie in my head. You know, I never see like visual art like that, like they do. And so for me, I'm really thinking about, you know, how the characters were talking to each other, what was the mood, you know, what nonverbal communication might have been happening, and just kind of all these different things. Nothing like what they represent on the page. So, like I say, to me, it's pure magic.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mm.
And also just something powerful about the picture book medium. Really, I mean, I suppose it's aimed at young readers, but there's so many possibilities for readers of any age. Um,
Yeah. Yeah,
thinking
I
about
get
this from
disturbed when people say that
oh yeah.
personally, because I think, no, I mean, there's so many topics you can lead into conversations among,
Mhm.
certainly adults who didn't grow up with these, most of them. And so they haven't had that rich exposure. But regardless of what age under their, K through 12, I mean, there's just so many things that you can move into deeper discussions because of what's represented in this piece of art. I mean, no other format gives you that. And it can say a lot of things that are very elevated beyond the usual target age of 4 to 7 years old. And there are other books where you're like, no, this is most definitely for middle grade, and that's really who it's going to speak to. And it can't speak to 4-year-olds, but the picture book can speak, far beyond that target age range. And that's what I really find fascinating about it.
Yeah, I don't think people age out of art, and getting to see that symbolism, that representation that comes through on the page
Um,
is just it's a beautiful thing and it's a powerful thing
mhm.
at any level.
Yeah, agreed.
So thinking about, I'm thinking about the illustrator and how they respond to your words. What do you hope that readers resonate with visually, verbally from the work that you do?
My hope is that first and foremost, they see Native people and Native nations in general as current, relevant, still here,
Hmm.
and that even if when you Google, Native people, the pictures are by and large sepia tone from the 1800s, that is not reality. The
Hmm.
reality is these folks are your peers at school, they're your neighbors, they are other people that are living in this country and around the world. And so that's really my hope, is just to say, this is a part of everyday life around you, even if it hasn't been something that maybe you've experienced before. And certainly my main focus initially is always to make sure that whoever is the subject of the story or the events that are talked about in the story, that the full humanity and the full experience of that is represented. Because so often it's been a shell of an
Hmm.
experience, right? Or a shell of a person. And you read those things and you're like, this is not written for someone to truly understand, or if it's, let's say, a native child from a particular tribe that may be represented or whatever, to go, oh yeah, yeah, that's I see that. I see some similarities there. That maybe not, maybe that's someone else in my tribe's experience, not mine, but I recognize that. So much of the time it's like, who is this written for? And it's written for this white gaze, right? It's not written. I never think
Hmm.
that like any of us would read any of these things, that any young people are going to pick up these books. And that's absolutely the wrong assumption. It's the same, it's the wrong assumption when teachers, educators assume there are never any native kids in their class. It's like that's the wrong, absolute wrong assumption to make, because we, as Native people in this land, look from blonde hair, blue eye to black. So you just you just can't make those assumptions. And so I wouldn't want readers to ever pick up my book and go, oh, this is just 2 dimensional. That would break my heart because I would not have done my job.
And that speaks to another powerful part of what your books do, which is they open up conversation and possibilities for children to see representations, experience representations, but then also sort of share about their own lives if they're comfortable doing so.
Mhm.
Never with multicultural education the thing of putting someone on the spot and saying, "Will you talk about this?" But more so the you have the space to talk about it if it's something that you want to share.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And again, hopefully it's helping the adults in the
Hmm.
room
Hmm.
to get beyond the intentional ignorance, right? That has been part and parcel of K-12 curriculum. If you don't put people in there, you don't write the history that is known and has been a part of this country's history, then you have people that grow up and have no clue about these things. And then they say, well, I don't know about this. It's like, I know it's intentional that you don't know. And that's
Mhm.
why we have trade literature that supplements your K-12 curriculum, which is of course why we have book bans going on, because there are people who definitely do not want folks to have access to trade literature because they know that that's what that's what it does. I mean, it allows, families, teachers, educators, librarians, to have access to books that just aren't a part of the curriculum. It's not going to get rewritten anytime soon, in a way that covers, across the country. There are some states that certainly, in terms of like Native nations and sovereignty and our history and things, do work cooperatively and have mandates that things will be taught within the state. But that's not across the nation. It's not a federal mandate. And so there's a lot that trade books provide. Similarly with LGBTQIAP plus books, that representation. It's not like we haven't had LGBTQIAP plus people, since time immemorial. But really, where you're going to find those representations of, again, their activism, you know, um, things that they've done, events, etc., is going to be in trade literature. And so our kids know their identities, they know their intersections, they know the people that they come from, the neighborhoods they live in, etc. And so to act like that doesn't exist or it needs to be outlawed. I mean, again, what are the adults like? What example are the adults setting and what message is that giving to them? It's like
Mhm.
they need to be able to express their full humanity. There have been a lot of people who have worked really hard to make it that they were not having to grow up like the rest of us did,
Right.
and there are other people who are like, well, we didn't have that in school. And I was like, yeah, exactly. So let's try to do better by our kids, right?
Yeah.
The future is
Yeah.
already here and let's do better. I mean, and the 2020 census, even though those are historically undercounts, it showed unequivocally that people under the age of 30 in the United States are majority non-white, even more so 18 and under. Well, that's the group that I write for,
Mhm.
So again, I'm looking at what in terms of fiction and nonfiction can what stories can I share that help them to see themselves, to see their peers, and just better reflect the world that they live in. Because that wasn't the type of literature that I had access to as a kid. It wasn't reflecting the world that I lived, even in my community, um, as multicultural as it was, with different tribes as well as, other people that weren't from tribes. And
Mhm.
so, we can do better. It's the 21st century.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's not power or strength in silencing voices or in refusing to have conversations.
No,
That's not what power and strength looks like. So,
not at all.
uh,
Not at all. I mean, not as it would be defined by the values of Cherokee people that I have grown up around, for sure. Yeah.
so one question we haven't talked about before we talk about anything that's upcoming or web spaces or
Mhm.
anything like that that you'd like to share is how you got started telling the stories that you tell and what it was that drew you to authoring.
Mhm.
We've sort of
Um,
hinted at it, I think, but not really
yeah, I
talked about
mean,
it.
I think one of the first things which I would never have said, oh, this started me on the authoring path, because it was a long time ago. But I was a first generation college student, and one of the
Same.
classes that I had, yeah, one of the classes that I had was I was a Native American Studies major, ethnic studies minor at UC Berkeley, and one of the classes that I had was people of mixed race descent, and one of the assignments was to do this survey of children's literature and look at the representation of mixed race descent people and families, communities in children's literature, and I was like, not gonna find anything. Well, of course there were, a few books. This is like the early 90s when I'm looking, and but nothing I had ever course, seen. And I wasn't, I didn't have little kids around me at the time. I'm on a college campus. And so, fast forward, years later, and I'm, out and about, and I've of course gone to museums and I've gone to bookstores and things. And so then I'd always look and I would say, oh, what's in the kids section? What do they have
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
represents Native people or people of, other races and ethnicities and backgrounds? And so I just kind of started collecting picture books from that. And then much later on, I get married and I have my son. And so I'm like, oh man, I know the world has changed. I was in school so long ago. And so he starts in preschool and early elementary. And I was like, my God, it has not changed. He's got the same curriculum. It's like the mythical Thanksgiving. People are
Mhm.
dressing up in these like crazy, you know, grocery bag vests and the feather, cardboard box things. I was just like, what's going on here? And, there's the paragraph about the Trail of Tears,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
Columbus shows up, and then the native people disappear. I'm like, that's it. And I said, in the 21st century? No way. No way is this happening. And of course it was, and it's still happening today in some parts. So that's really what fueled me, because my mom is always like, if there's a problem and you know how to figure it out, or you feel like you can contribute, then like quit complaining and get on it. Right. And at that time, I mean, I didn't major in English. I wasn't, a creative writing major, hadn't done any of that kind of stuff. I couldn't even stand reading in middle school and high school. I hated all the, assigned things. But I knew I had a friend from graduate school, and I called, and has written for young people and adults. He's a professor. And I said, hey, if I wanted to write a story for young people, how would I go about that? And so he gave me, great advice, which, I mean, the main thing is like, finish the story, whatever you think you want to write, get it done, give it to
Mhm.
people for, feedback, etc. And so, at that time, we had moved to Kansas City. So there were a lot of authors and illustrators in that area. Some because of course, there's a major greeting card company there, that people worked for. But I found some really great mentors. And then I was able to start kind of reaching out and connecting to, a few other Native authors. And I'm thrilled to say that, when I first had that thought, which was not even quite 10 years ago, almost though, where we're at now, where there is a cadre, of colleagues that are from a variety of Native nations across the country. It's an exciting time. I didn't know they were also thinking about writing books and kind of preparing those things. So that's really what got me started, was just thinking, wait a second, I took this class in the early 90s, and here we
Mhm.
are, in the 2010s, and curriculum's the same. Like, what's happening here?
Mhm. Mhm.
So that was the impetus for really saying, okay, what can I bring to the table? And I write fiction and nonfiction because I love to read fiction and nonfiction, and I have since I was a child. I like to write across a variety of formats. Yes, do have picture books. I also have middle grade chapter books. But I want to do a variety of things. And I've written poems for anthologies and a graphic script for a nonfiction anthology biography about Tira Frazier, because that's what I like to do, right? I want to challenge myself to have to learn something new and stretch and grow. And I had a wonderful school visit in March. This young student, he asked me, he goes, how long do you think you're going to keep writing for? I said, that is an excellent question. I
Mhm.
said, you know
Mhm.
what? I said, as long as I'm enjoying it. I said, every
Like that.
time I've done a different job, different career, I just got to a place where I was like, okay, I think I've learned what I need to learn. I've contributed. I'm not enjoying this as much. I feel like I need a new challenge. I said, so,
Mhm.
the good thing about writing is that every book, there's no formula. Every book is its own journey. And I said, so it really keeps me on my toes, and I have to think. And I said, I have to figure out that puzzle, because that puzzle is not the same as the one I just finished and turned in and got published. I said, so every single time I get to challenge myself and I get to grow. And Sometimes I'm working with the same people and sometimes I'm not. I have books published by different publishers. I said, so I still enjoying it right now. And as long as I'm enjoying it, I'll keep doing it. Um, so
Love it.
yeah, I thought that was a great question. I was like, yeah, why do something that you don't enjoy? I mean, it takes up, right? I mean, earning a living does take up time out of our lives. And I would hope that we're all able to enjoy. It doesn't need to be your passion, but that you do find enjoyment in it, on some level for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. A great question and a great answer as well. Yeah. So as we're coming to our last couple of minutes, any
Mhm.
events? You mentioned a collaboration that's on the way. Any web spaces that you want to share about? Any of those
Sure.
pieces that you want to leave
Sure.
listeners with?
You can find me always at tracisorell.com, Traci, S is in Sam, ORELL.com. It says on there you can sign up for a quarterly newsletter. It's a little bit longer than quarterly, between newsletters. Hopefully I'll get back to quarterly. So I'm not going to junk up your inbox, but I do, share information about books. I also like to do book giveaways. So not just my books, but many other creators' books as well. So you can add books to your library. Maybe you're a teacher, your classroom library, or your school librarian, your school library. Um, or gift them to others. But that's one way to certainly reach me. And this fall, in addition to, like I say, I have 3 Spanish versions out this year. I have a middle grade novel in verse that I've co-written with Charles Waters, and that'll be out September 5th, 2023. Very, very excited about it. The over 1,900 schools in K-12 schools have native themed mascots. And so the book is set in a fictional suburb of Washington, D.C., with 6 8th graders from very diverse backgrounds who really are looking at this issue, in their school district and what they feel about it. The high school students have taken some action. They're having to address it. And so their teacher has the class look at it in their honors English class as kind of an oral presentation and writing assignment. And so it's that whole journey of, I mean, adults around them, of course, present a variety of viewpoints, but like, what do they think? And what's
Mhm.
their journey to make sense of that whole issue, and I think that's definitely something that young people across the country are doing, and they're also looking at the adults around them, to see what their thinking is and how they make sense of that issue as well. So I'm looking forward to hearing from young people, their thoughts and experiences.
Yeah, I assume that's mascot right there.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And cover art, wonderful cover art by Nicole Neidhart, who is Dene or
I love
Navajo.
it.
Yeah, so it's just wonderful. Here's the full cover.
Love
Yeah,
the
so
verse novel. Love it.
yeah, so I'm just super excited about that. And working on a middle grade nonfiction book right now about called Riding the Trail, Cherokees Remember the Removal, following the young people from the Cherokee Nation each year go and retrace the trail on bicycles. So right now, this year's group are currently on the trail and they are still in Missouri. They'll be home at the end of this week, but it's over 950 miles that they're riding and it's just incredible, leadership opportunity for them and just learning, where their ancestors were on the trail, if there's different routes that were taken and just that difficult period in our history and how it's still very much with us today, even though people act like, we all died off after that point. It's like, no, we're all here,
Mhm.
now living in what was then Indian Territory, what is now the Cherokee Nation Reservation within the northeast corner of Oklahoma. Um, so yeah, I'm excited for that too. That'll be a photo illustrated book and be out in 2025.
As the title of the book says, we are still here.
We are. We absolutely are. And certainly wanting to do more than just surviving, right? I mean, looking to thrive as we want everyone around us to be doing, for sure.
I'm gonna probably misquote the title, but the Bettina Love title, "We Want to Do More Than Survive."
Yeah, always, 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 right? I mean, always say there is no one pie, there's no limited pieces of the pie.
Right?
It doesn't exist. Don't buy into the scarcity mentality.
The
Yeah,
community.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for taking some time to talk with me, and such a pleasure to share about your work. And always glad to talk with you about books and uh, sharing stories.
Well, no, I appreciate it very much. Thank you for the invitation, and I look forward to visiting again.
Sounds great. Thank you.